You're watching Extras from the Extension on Eagle Community Television. This show is brought to you by Carico Implement.
Hello, I'm Stacy Campbell with K-State Research and Extension of Ellis County, and I have a special guest with me today. Phil Stahlman is the weed scientist at the Hayes Agriculture Experiment Station. And Phil, of course, with no-till farming, there's been a plethora of different herbicides that farmers use to try to do an effective weed control. But as we kind of progressed into no-till farming, some of the weeds have gotten harder to control, and we've got a backdrop here of some of them that you were going to talk about as far as some things that farmers can do ahead of time to try to get ahead of some of these harder to control weeds in their farming systems.
Yes, that's right, Stacy. The weed that we're most have been concerned with in recent years is that of kochia. Glyphosate-resistant kochia obviously has become resistant to glyphosate. We know that the best time to control that weed when you can't use glyphosate is as a pre-emergence herbicide application early in the spring of the year. However, we've been pretty lucky the last few years to have some pretty dry springs.
Yeah.
But we know that early spring application, and by that I'm talking about February, early March, is not always possible.
Okay.
And so we've been doing quite a bit of work looking at late fall herbicide applications. And by that, I think most people would think about a late September, October application. But we believe that's a little too early for most of the residual herbicides. And so we would encourage growers to wait until at least the middle of November before they make a residual herbicide application.
Okay, and that's provided as long as the ground's not frozen, I believe.
Yes, that's right, and we're going to have a lot of rain for that to occur, I think, and that would be a wonderful problem to have.
Yeah.
But typically we have open falls, and it's just a lot easier to make a herbicide application late in the fall than it is early in the spring sometimes.
Okay. And by your research out here, what are some of those herbicide options that farmers should be looking at in the late fall in this November time frame?
Well, there are several that are possible. Anything that would have a lengthy residual component to it. Just because of cost, most growers are probably going to rely on some dicamba and some atrazine. Those would be the two most common herbicides.
Okay. And then, I guess there are other choices as well that you found in your research?
Yes, there are. Any number of different herbicides, some Corvus or some Balance Pro, for example, would be good options. They tend to be a little more costly, however.
Okay. And then we're not, of course, with these applications, we're not just talking kochia control. There are several other weeds we're going to get. We're going to get some of our winter annuals and maybe kind of expound on maybe some of the other weeds we could control. And
that's right.
How long maybe into the spring?
Well, how long into the spring is going to depend upon just how wet it gets in the spring of the year and how early it gets in the spring of the year. But you're right. We can get winter annual grass as well as broadleaf control with those herbicides as well. Most of those herbicides are not going to get the grower to the time of crop planting in all likelihood.
Right.
So they're going to have to do something supplemental to the fall applications, but at least they can take out that initial flush of kochia, and we know that is the critical thing to do.
And I know, different modes of action is a big buzzword, if you will, now, and especially with our glyphosate-resistant type weeds. I believe if you've got possibly trizine-resistant kochia populations, the atrazine may not work. But there are some different options.
That's true, although we don't have as much trizine resistance as we used to have.
Okay.
Because we've used less trizines or less atrazine primarily. The other class of herbicides that we have to deal with occasionally with resistance would be the ALS inhibiting herbicides. That would be such things as Glean or Finesse or Ally, herbicides of that nature.
And then pre-emergence, that's kind of the I guess that other different mode of action in the spring, we're definitely going to need one.
It's not necessarily a different mode of action,
Yeah.
it's just a different timing of the
Yeah.
application. And the pre-emergence aspect is really important for kochia because it's much easier to control it with a pre-emergence herbicide application than it is try to come in and salvage with a post-emergent application.
And you know, we're talking kochia, but I know pigweed is definitely on the front burner now too.
Yes, it
and
is.
I believe quite a few of these products will work pretty well with the pigweeds too, if I'm correct.
Yes, they will. The problem there, or the difference, is that the pigweed emerges much later into the spring.
Okay.
And so a late fall application probably is not going to be nearly as effective for the Palmer amaranth control as it would be for kochia.
And so that's where getting a pre-emergent down and hopefully getting the moisture to incorporate it will also greatly help, but potentially with the pigweeds as well.
Yes, that's right. But the growers are really going to have to start thinking in terms of overlapping residuals for season-long weed control. By that I mean get a residual herbicide down as a pre-emergence very early in the spring, and then before that completely dissipates, probably going to have to come back in with some additional herbicide to
So
carry
how
that
early is
further.
very early in the spring?
Well, with kochia, it will start emerging in February if conditions are right, moisture conditions are right. But so late February, first part of March, typically we will have some open weather during that time period that people could get out on the fields, unless it's just we've had a real wet winter.
Okay, and then again at planting time, whether it be sorghum or corn that you're going to be planting, try to do another application close to planting time.
Yeah, you'll have to have a burn down application at that time just to clean up any escapes, and with an additional residual to carry you on into the crop.
Okay, right. So I mean, definitely some expense there, but if you want to try to keep your fields weed free and keep those yields up and try not to have more headaches down the road, a producer is going to have to, you know, expend probably a little bit more money with our herbicide programs now.
It definitely is going to be more costly. It's also more complicated. And so it really is important that a grower really gives some advanced thought to his weed control program.
Okay. And of course, we've got resources such as yourself that they can contact if they've got some questions, and also their local extension office as well. Well, Phil,
That's right.
I appreciate your time today. This has been Stacy Campbell and Phil Stahlman with K-State Research and Extension and Eagle Community Television.
You're watching extras from the Extension on Eagle Community Television. This show is brought to you by Carico Implement.
Fall is here, and it's a great time to come out and visit Carico Implement in Hayes for all of your fall lawn care needs. We stock and sell a full line of John Deere riding lawn equipment, along with Honda walk-behind mowers and generators. We also offer a full lineup of Steel outdoor power products. If your project requires even more muscle, come check out the lineup of John Deere compacts, tractors, and skid loaders. And don't forget, we have the parts and services to keep you up and running for whatever your fall lawn care needs are. So come and visit Carico Implement for a solution that fits.